It was supposed to be a simple DNA test to map the family tree of King Tut. But when the lab coats came back with the results, the entire timeline of ancient Egypt shattered.
We are getting results. The DNA readouts are showing that we can take cutting-edge scientific skills and apply them to a very interesting question. Who are these people? What are their diseases? I think this is a remarkable project.
The data pointed to a ghost. A woman who ruled an empire vanished into thin air and was erased from history. We thought she was lost forever, but it turns out she has been waiting in a museum basement, screaming to be heard. And the person who silenced her, it might be the one person she trusted the most. The face of a monster. In the sweltering heat of 1898, a French archaeologist named Victor Loret cracked open the seal of a tomb known as KV-35. He was expecting to find the great warrior kings of the past, and he did. He found Amenhotep II still lying in his sarcophagus, but that wasn't the discovery that would haunt historians for the next century. In a side chamber, thrown haphazardly on the floor, were three other mummies: a young boy, an older woman with beautiful long hair, and a younger woman. For years, these bodies were ignored. They were just the others, the driftwood of history. But the younger woman, known simply as the younger lady, stood out for one horrifying reason. Her face had been completely destroyed, a massive, gaping hole where her mouth and jaw used to be. For decades, experts looked at this damage and shrugged. They said it was the work of tomb robbers, looters who, in their haste to rip gold masks off the dead, had smashed the face of the mummy. It was a tragedy, but it was considered accidental damage that happened long after she died. But here is the catch. Modern science doesn't rely on assumptions. It relies on data. When researchers recently put the younger lady under a CT scanner, they found something that changed everything. If a tomb robber smashes a dried-out mummy, the bones shatter like glass. The breaks are sharp and brittle. But the CT scan showed something else entirely. The edges of the shattered jaw weren't brittle. There was evidence of a specific type of trauma that only happens when the bone is still wet. Living bone. This wasn't post-mortem damage. This woman was struck in the face with a heavy object while she was still alive. And get this, the angle of the blow suggests she was standing up, facing her attacker. This wasn't a robbery, it was an execution. Someone looked this woman in the eyes and delivered a blow so powerful it silenced her forever. The question that has obsessed Egyptologists is simple. Who was she? Why did someone hate her this much? And could this battered, nameless body actually be the legendary Queen Nefertiti? To understand the gravity of this, we have to look at the other body in the room. The elder lady lying next to her was identified through a lock of hair found in King Tut's tomb. She was Queen Tiye, the powerful mother of Akhenaten. If the elder lady was royalty, it stands to reason the younger lady was too. But for over 100 years, she remained a ghost, a face without a name, a victim without a story, until the DNA machines turned on. The bloodline betrayal. Here is the deal. In 2010, a massive project began to map the DNA of the 18th dynasty. The goal was to figure out exactly who King Tut's parents were. We knew his father was likely the heretic King Akhenaten, but his mother was a mystery. There were many candidates: Nefertiti, the great royal wife; Kia, a secondary wife; or perhaps someone we had never heard of. The scientists took samples from the younger lady's bone marrow, hoping for a match. What they found was shocking. The DNA proved, without a shadow of a doubt, that the younger lady was the biological mother of King Tut. That is a massive discovery on its own, but the results went further. They compared her DNA to the mummy in KV-55, which is almost certainly Akhenaten. And this is where the story takes a dark turn. The DNA showed that the younger lady and Akhenaten shared the same parents. They were full brother and sister. This revelation sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. Why? Because historically, Nefertiti is never referred to as the king's sister. She is called Great Royal Wife, Lady of Grace, Sweet of Love, but never King's Sister. In ancient Egypt, titles were everything. If you were a royal sister, you bragged about it. It gave you status. The fact that Nefertiti didn't use this title led many experts to believe she wasn't from the royal bloodline, that she might have been a foreign princess or the daughter of a high-ranking official named A. So the logic went like this. The younger lady is Akhenaten's sister. Nefertiti was not Akhenaten's sister. Therefore, the younger lady cannot be Nefertiti. Case closed, right? Wrong. It is not that simple. Let's look at the valuable fluff that often gets ignored. Ancient Egyptian royal families were incredibly complex. Incest was not just common, it was expected. It was how they kept the bloodline pure, mimicking the gods. But records from the Amarna period, the time when Nefertiti ruled, are notoriously messy. This was a time of chaos. Akhenaten was upending religion, moving the capital and changing the art. It is entirely possible that Nefertiti was his sister, but for political or religious reasons, they chose to emphasize her role as a wife and partner rather than a sibling. Or consider this. DNA definitions of brother and sister can sometimes get tricky when you have generations of inbreeding. First cousins, who are the product of sibling marriages, can look like siblings genetically. The family tree is more like a family wreath. But if we stick to the most direct interpretation, the younger lady is a daughter of Amenhotep III and Queen Tai. This makes her a royal princess by birth. And get this, if the younger lady is Nefertiti, it means our entire understanding of her origin story is wrong. But it also explains why she was so powerful. A royal sister wife would have had immense authority. But if she is the mother of Tut and she is Nefertiti, why is her face smashed in? Why was she left in a side chamber of someone else's tomb? The DNA gave us a relationship, but it didn't give us a name. It gave us a what, but it didn't give us a who. To find that, we have to go back to the scene of the crime. The queen who vanished. To understand why someone would want to smash Nefertiti's face, you have to understand who she was. She wasn't just a pretty face on a bust in Berlin. She was a revolutionary. Alongside her husband, Akhenaten, she dismantled the entire religious system of Egypt. For thousands of years, the Egyptians worshipped a pantheon of gods: Amun, Osiris, Isis. The priesthood of Amun was incredibly powerful, controlling vast wealth and land. Nefertiti and Akhenaten said, "No more." They declared that there was only one god, the Aten, the sun disk. They shut down the temples. They fired the priests. They moved the capital city to the middle of the desert, a place now called Amarna. And at the center of this new world was Nefertiti. In the art from this period, she is depicted doing things only a pharaoh would do. She is shown smiting enemies. She is shown driving her own chariot. In some carvings, she is the same size as her husband, which was unheard of. Basically, she put a target on her back. The old priest hated her. The traditionalists hated her. Even the army likely resented the shift in power. And then, around the 12th year of Akhenaten's reign, she vanishes from the record. For a long time, historians thought she fell out of favor or died of a plague. But recent evidence suggests something much more interesting. She didn't disappear. She got a promotion. There is a theory that Nefertiti took on a new name, Neferuaten, and ruled as a female king, a co-regent alongside her husband. And when he died, she may have ruled alone as a sole pharaoh named Smenkhkare. Imagine the power trip. She went from queen to king. But this is where the danger peaks. Egypt did not like female kings, and it definitely did not like heretic kings. If Nefertiti outlived her husband and tried to keep the sun worship revolution going, she would have been the most hated person in the kingdom. The backlash against the Amarna period was violent. After King Tut died, the new rulers tried to erase Akhenaten and Nefertiti from history. They chipped their names off walls, they smashed their statues, they dismantled their city stone by stone. So here's the deal. If the regime fell, and Nefertiti was the face of that regime, she wouldn't have been given a nice burial. She would have been targeted. This brings us back to the younger lady in KV 35. The violence on her body matches the violence done to the statues. It was personal. It was an erasure. The person who swung the weapon didn't just want to eliminate her, they wanted to destroy her identity. In the Egyptian belief system, if your mouth is destroyed, you cannot speak your name to the gods in the afterlife. You cannot breathe. You cease to exist eternally. Smashing the face was the ultimate punishment. It was a spiritual death sentence. And this lines up perfectly with the hatred directed at Nefertiti. The puzzle pieces fit. We have a body of a royal woman from the right time period who was the mother of the next king and who was brutally silenced. But there is one final piece of forensic evidence that connects the dots in a way that is hard to ignore. The murder weapon. Let's go back to that wound. It is not just a messy break. Forensic experts have analyzed the impact. The blow came from the left side, striking the mouth and jaw with tremendous force. It destroyed the teeth, the bone, and the soft tissue. But interestingly, there is no sign of healing. This means the blow was fatal, or she died moments later. Some historians have suggested a chariot accident. If she fell from a speeding chariot, could she have smashed her face? It is possible, but usually a fall like that would cause other injuries. Broken arms from trying to catch herself, ribs, legs. The younger lady doesn't have those. The trauma is localized to the face in a separate wound to the chest. This looks like an attack. The weapon was likely a heavy mace or a dull axe. But here is the catch. In the tomb lying near the mummy was a detached arm. For a long time, it was just a loose bone. But researchers realized it actually belonged to the younger lady. And in the hand of that arm, it was clenched. Clenched as if holding something? No. The fingers were positioned in a royal gesture, holding a scepter that had long since rotted away. Even in death, she was positioned as a queen. But the most chilling detail is the beading found in the chest cavity. When the body was mummified, the embalmers stuffed the chest with resin-soaked linen to keep the shape. But inside the wound in the mouth, they also packed linen. This is crucial. If the wound happened 1,000 years later by robbers, there would be no embalming resin inside the break. The fact that the embalmers tried to fix the face proves the damage happened before she was wrapped. It means the people who buried her knew she was murdered, and yet they buried her without a name. They stripped her of her coffins, her gold, and her identity. They hid her in a side room of a different king's tomb. It was a burial, yes, but it was also a concealment. They were hiding the body. Why? Maybe to protect her from the mobs who wanted to destroy her completely? Or maybe the people who buried her were the ones who eliminated her, and they were trying to hide the evidence? And that brings us to the double piercing. The younger lady has 2 piercings in her left ear. For a long time, this was the smoking gun. Nefertiti is famously depicted in reliefs with a double piercing in her ear. It is a rare fashion statement for the time. It is like a fingerprint. When you combine the royal blood, the mother of Tut status, the time frame, the violent death consistent with a political assassination, and the double piercing, the probability meter goes through the roof. The final verdict. So, is the younger lady actually Nefertiti? Zahi Hawass, the most famous Egyptologist in the world, has been circling this answer for years. He initially argued against it, claiming Nefertiti wasn't of royal blood and therefore could not be the genetic mother of a king. But recently, his tune has changed. He is currently leading a massive new DNA project, rescanning and retesting every mummy from the 18th dynasty. He has hinted that he believes he has found her, and many experts believe he is going to point right back to the younger lady. The sister DNA result is the only thing standing in the way, but as we discussed, sister in ancient Egypt is a fluid term, or perhaps we just need to accept that Nefertiti was a royal daughter we didn't know about. However, if we peel back the layers of orthodoxy and look at the darker, wilder possibilities, the sister result might not be an error. It might be the smoking gun of a family tree that had collapsed in on itself. One prevailing, albeit controversial theory suggests that the genetic entanglement of the Amarna royal family was far more complex than a simple brother-sister marriage. If the younger lady is Nefertiti and the DNA says she is Akhenaten's sister, we must consider the possibility that Nefertiti was actually the daughter of Amenhotep III and Queen Tiye, making her a full royal sister to Akhenaten. This would explain her immense power, her immediate elevation to the status of great royal wife, and why she was allowed to smash religious icons alongside her husband. It wasn't just a marriage, it was a divine consolidation of power between two children of the same God King. But if the younger lady is Nefertiti, it changes history. It means the most powerful woman in the world didn't fade away into obscurity or die of a plague. It means she was brutally murdered. To understand the brutality of the murder, we have to look at the wildest theory of all, that Nefertiti did not die as a queen, but as a king. For decades, scholars have argued over the identity of the shadowy pharaoh Smenkhare, or Neferneferuaten, who ruled briefly after Akhenaten's death and before Tutankhamun took the throne. The orthodox view places a male figure here, but the wilder, more compelling theory is that Nefertiti reinvented herself. Just as Hatshepsut had done generations before, Nefertiti may have cast aside her female identity to hold the fracturing empire together. She may have donned the false beard, taken the crook and flail, and ruled as sole pharaoh. If the younger lady is this female pharaoh, the violent wound to her face takes on a horrifying political significance. This was not a domestic dispute. This was regicide. Imagine the scenario. Akhenaten dies, leaving a power vacuum in a country on the brink of civil war. The priests of Amun are clamoring for a return to the old gods. The army is restless. Nefertiti steps into the void, a desperate attempt to keep the sun disk religion alive. She rules with an iron fist, attempting to stabilize a dynasty that is genetically and politically rotting from the inside out. But the enemies at the gate are actually inside the palace walls. If she was ruling as a king, her murder was a coup d'etat. The smashing of her face, specifically the mouth, was not random. In ancient Egyptian belief, the opening of the mouth ceremony was essential for the soul to breathe and speak in the afterlife. By destroying her mouth and jaw, her assassins weren't just eliminating her body, they were attempting to execute her soul. They were silencing her for eternity, ensuring that the heretic queen could never speak her blasphemous prayers to the Aten in the Hall of Judgment. It was a ritualistic execution designed to wipe her from existence in both this world and the next. There is another, even darker possibility that connects the younger lady to international intrigue and high treason. This theory revolves around the Damunsu affair. Ancient Hittite records tell of a widowed Egyptian queen who wrote a desperate letter to the Hittite king Suppiluliuma I. "My husband has died and I have no son," the letter reads. "They say about you that you have many sons. You might give me one of your sons to become my husband. I would not wish to take one of my subjects as a husband. I am afraid." For years, historians debated who wrote this. Was it Ankhesenamun, Tut's widow? Or was it Nefertiti, immediately following Akhenaten's death? If the younger lady is Nefertiti, this letter may have been her death warrant. The theory goes like this. Nefertiti, terrified of the rising power of the fanatical general Horemheb, or the Vizier I, tried to pull off a geopolitical Hail Mary. She attempted to marry a Hittite prince to solidify her claim to the throne and protect her family from the Egyptian military elite. But the letter was intercepted, or the plot was discovered. To the xenophobic Egyptian court, inviting a foreign prince to sit on the throne of the pharaohs was the ultimate treason. It was unforgivable. If this theory holds, the younger lady wasn't eliminated by a jealous lover. She was executed by the deep state of Egypt, the military commanders and high priests who would rather see the dynasty burn than see a foreigner wear the double crown. The blow to her face was the punishment for her treasonous tongue. And where does this leave Tutankhamun? If the younger lady is Nefertiti, it means King Tut grew up as an orphan, knowing his mother was murdered and his father was a heretic. We often view Tutankhamun as a puppet, a frail boy who died young. But consider the psychological horror of his childhood. He was raised in a palace of ghosts. If Nefertiti was his mother, he likely witnessed her decline or the aftermath of her murder. He was a child of incest, born with a club foot and a genetic disposition to weakness, thrust onto the throne at 8 or 9 years old. He was surrounded by the very men who likely orchestrated his mother's death, Ai and Horemheb. This explains why Tut turned his back on the sun god and went back to the old ways. It wasn't just religious piety, it was a survival strategy. Maybe he was trying to save himself from the same fate. He saw the gaping hole in his mother's face. He knew what happened to those who defied the priests of Amun. The restoration of the old gods was an act of terror-induced compliance. The boy king was a hostage in his own palace, forced to denounce his parents' legacy to keep his own head. The terrified look on the younger lady's face, even with the damage, speaks volumes. It is the face of a woman who saw her end coming. For 3,000 years, she lay in the dark, stripped of her name, known only as a number. KV35YL. But science has given her a voice again. So what do you think? Are we ready to face the truth that the icons we worship might have had endings more horrific than we ever imagined? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to keep digging into the mysteries of the ancient world with us, smash that like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching.